What is up, beautiful travelers? We are going back to the basics today because I figured, what if you've never been to Spain and you know absolutely nothing about this country? So, if you are visiting Spain for the very first time in your life, this video is exactly what you need to see. In this guide, visiting Spain for the very first time, we are covering everything from culture to logistics. Let's dive right in. So, the first thing you need to know about visiting Spain for the very first time is some basic information, such as the official language in Spain is Castellano, also known as Spanish, but it is very important to know that there are also some regional languages in Spain, such as Catalan in Catalunya, Basque in País Vasco, and Galician in Galicia. The official languages and the regional languages in Spain are something to keep in mind, as depending on the region that you travel to in Spain, they can be communicating in different ways outside of Castellano. Big tip, and something that I think everybody should know, whether you are visiting Spain for the first time or not, is to learn a little bit of basic Spanish. This is not only going to make your life easier, but it's also going to make the people that are serving you easier, such as waiters, bartenders, and people that work in these industries. The next travel tip you need to know if you're visiting Spain for the very first time is all about the currency in Spain. The currency is euro. Most places do accept credit cards, but however, if you are going to go to a village such as a pueblo or a small town in Spain, it would be ideal to keep cash handy. Sometimes businesses that are in these small villages don't have credit card machines and they prefer cash. Lastly, another place where cash would be preferred in Spain over credit cards would definitely be markets. So if you plan to do any food shopping or just souvenir shopping for markets in Spain, definitely try to bring cash handy because some of these vendors might not have their credit card machines. And here's a super duper pro tip, especially if you are American traveling to Spain. I would highly recommend to get a travel friendly bank account if you do need to access cash. The best travel friendly bank account for Americans, in my opinion, is definitely Charles Schwab, the high yield investor checking account. Here you have no minimum balances needed. You get ATM free rebates. So if you are in Spain and you happen to go to the ATM, they will charge you in that moment, but they'll reimburse you by the end of the month, or if not the end of the month, the beginning of the month. So it's technically free to go to an ATM that's not your bank because you do get reimbursed. And lastly, there are no foreign transaction fees or conversion fees if you do happen to pay with your debit card. So even if you don't want cash, but you do want a travel friendly bank account to be using in Spain to swipe, definitely check out that high yield investor checking account with Charles Schwab. It's one of my faves and I've been using them for years. And also to add on, the customer service at Charles Schwab is off the charts. The next tip I have, if you are visiting Spain for the very first time and you would like to convert US dollars to euros, I would highly recommend to avoid converting money at the airport. And I would highly recommend going to a cash converting service such as Quick Gold. This is where you'll get the best rate, and they have tons of locations all over Spain. So, highly recommend checking out Quick Gold to convert money in Spain. And the last thing that I want to say is if you are going to convert money in the US while you are still stateside, I would highly recommend to go to TD Bank because that is one of the American banks that have euros. And if they don't have euros, they can order it. But heads up, you do need to do this in advance. This isn't something you want to do a day before you leave to Spain. And the next thing you need to know visiting Spain for the very first time is all about voltage because this is very important when it comes to electronics. The standard voltage in Spain is 230V with a frequency of 50 Hz. In simpler terms, this means that your electronics will probably need a plug adapter to get charged in Spain. I will link some of my favorite plug adapters in the video description for you guys to check out, but you definitely want to bring a Type C or F plug adapter when you're traveling Spain. And the last basic thing you need to know about visiting Spain for the very first time is all about the time zone. In Spain, you will be 6 to 9 hours ahead of American time zones. Spain's time zone is CET, which stands for Central European Time Zone. And then during daylight saving times, it's CEST, which stands for Central European Summer Time Zone. And now that you know the very basic info when visiting Spain for the very first time, we are now going to move on to entry details. Entry details are things like entry and visa. And if you are American, it's very important to know that you do not need a visa to visit Spain for the very first time or to visit Spain in general, as long as you are not going to be staying in Spain for more than 90 days. If you stay in Spain for more than 90 days, which equals out to 3 months, you will then need to find a visa that you qualify for to legally reside in the country. So at the time that I make this video, June 2025, you do not need a visa to enter Spain. However, a lot of European countries at the end of 2026 are going to start doing an ETIAS form. And this is pretty much a travel authorization form that non visa travelers are going to need to obtain for short stays. ETIAS stands for European Travel Information and Authorization System. And the whole point of this is to enhance security. The ETIAS form will basically enhance security by pre screening travelers and identifying potential risks for illegal immigration, security, and even public health. But as I said, this is scheduled for the end of 2026, so no need to worry now. And lastly, if you are visiting Spain for the very first time, it's very important to note that you need to have your passport valid for 6 months to successfully enter the country. You also need to have return ticket or proof of onward travel that you're not just going to stay in Spain. And lastly, although this is rarely checked, it is really important and good to have, which is proof of funds. And I'm not going to elaborate on this too much because I have another video, how to travel from the US to Spain, that goes into nitty-gritty detail on how to successfully travel from the US to Spain. So be sure to check that out if you're interested. I've linked it up here. All right, so now that we've got down basic info, entry and visa information when you're visiting Spain for the very first time, now we're moving on to cultural information. Something that's very important to know and shocks many Americans is that meal times are much later in Spain than they are in the US. Starting off with lunch, lunch is usually anywhere from 2 to 4 p.m., and dinner is from 9 all the way as late as 11 p.m. If you don't agree nor like the meal times in Spain, my favorite solution for this is looking for a restaurant with an all day kitchen. This is also known as cocina abierta todo el día. Spain is a big country. It depends where you are going in Spain to tell you exactly where there's going to be a cocina abierta todo el día. But if you happen to visit the Canary Islands, here there's not that much of a midday break. And in big Spanish cities such as Madrid and Barcelona, you will find some restaurants, not all of them, of course, that do have the kitchen open all day. So in reality, it's all a matter of just looking and planning for it. And the next travel tip you need to know about visiting Spain for the very first time is all about dining out. And this is specifically if you find a restaurant that you like and you really want to dine in, it is so important and crucial to make sure you make a reservation. And the reason for this is because not all restaurants prioritize walk ins. Some restaurants actually only cook enough food for the reservation. So you just want to avoid all the headache and frustration of being hungry, trying to find a place to eat, and not being able to actually dine anywhere because you don't have a reservation. So I would recommend to avoid all the frustration, figure out where you want to visit in Spain, figure out the places you want to dine in, call or email and make a reservation. And the next tip you need to know when visiting Spain for the very first time is all about tipping. Tipping in Spain is rather modest. You can easily round up or leave 5 to 10% if you really like the service. The next thing you need to know about visiting Spain for the very first time is all about greetings. In Spain, you greet with a kiss on each cheek. Greeting with a kiss on each cheek is a super common way to greet, even for new acquaintances. But of course, if you feel uncomfortable with that, feel free to give someone a handshake. This greeting might be a bit overwhelming, especially if you're not from a Latin culture and you're not used to being so touchy with people you don't really know. So, that is everything you need to know about greeting in Spain. The next thing you need to know about visiting Spain for the very first time is that you need to respect the quiet hours. Respecting siesta culture is super important because whether you like it or not, these businesses are going to close midday, especially on the peninsula. So right now I'm living in the Canary Islands and I'm finding here that most places do not close midday, but in the peninsula when I was living in Madrid, it was honestly to the T. These shops close midday. So, something that's really important to note with the siesta hours and the midday break is that businesses and restaurants don't have the same siesta hours. The siesta and midday break for restaurants usually run from 4 p.m. to 8 to 8:30 p.m. and then they'll reopen from 8:30 till close, for example. Next, small shops such as a print shop will close from 2 to 5 and then they'll reopen from 5 to 8 or 5 to close. And here's everything you need to know about the siesta and midday break in Spain. So the siesta in Spain has a lot of historical roots and it really started with agricultural workers having to take a break in the middle of the day because in Spain it gets significantly hotter midday, specifically at 4 to 7 or 3 to 6. And originally, the siesta was created for these agricultural workers to get a break from this heat and to get away from the sun. Next, the siesta is a chance for rest and rejuvenation. So it's a chance to rest, recharge, combat fatigue, and improve productivity. And the next, and I think one of the most important things you need to know about siesta is it has a lot to do with family time. The siestas involve a longer lunch break, allowing families to eat together and enjoy each other's company. And while siestas continue to evolve as a tradition in Spain, they are a symbolism of a more relaxed and flexible approach to a work life balance. So remember, a siesta isn't just a moment in time where people sleep in the middle of the day in Spain. It's rooted from agricultural workers and avoiding the excessive heat and excessive sun in Spain. It's meant for family time, for families to have lunch together. And lastly, it's a moment for rest and recharge for workers who have long days. All right, and the last cultural tip you need to know about visiting Spain for the very first time is all about Sunday closures. So, most businesses and shops close on Sundays, no exceptions. So, if you want to do any shopping in Spain, be sure to do it any other day outside of Sunday. So, now that we've covered cultural tips visiting Spain for the very first time, now we are going to talk a little bit about food and drink. So, the first thing you need to know about visiting Spain for the very first time is all about tapas. Tapas are small shared plates, so do not expect to get full off of one tapa. If you really want to explore the tapa scene when you visit Spain, be sure to do tapeo. Tapeo means tapa hopping, and you're going from tapa restaurant to tapa restaurant, exploring all the tapas from place to place. And by the end of tapeo, you should be insanely full and have enjoyed a bunch of different little dishes. Doing tapeo is a must, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're a foodie, because that's an incredible way to get to learn Spanish tapa culture. And the next travel tip you need to know about visiting Spain for the very first time is all about the drinking age, and that is the drinking age in Spain is 18 years old. Wine and beer are very cheap and they are very common at all meals. The next food tip in Spain is all about coffee. If you are American and you are a coffee drinker, it is very important to note that coffee in America is very different than coffee in Spain. And let me just explain. So, for coffee in Spain, if you ask for a normal coffee or ask for a café solo, that would be an espresso. Next, if you ask for café con leche, that's actually espresso with milk. And lastly, Cafe Americano is not a US drip coffee, it's actually a watered down espresso. And if you happen to like iced coffee and you would like to try iced coffee in Spain, that is really going to be a cup of ice that a waiter is going to bring you with a hot cup of espresso. And then you're going to put the ice over the espresso or pour the espresso over the ice, and that will be your iced coffee. You can also add milk to your cafe con hielo if you'd like. So, as you can see, coffee is very different compared to the US, and it is also very strong in Spain. So, something to keep in mind. I'm not a coffee drinker, but maybe you are. The last thing I want to say about coffee is that coffee is super affordable in Spain, so be sure to check that out. And if you are headed to Madrid specifically, be sure to check out my Breakfast in Madrid video that has tons of breakfast in Madrid recommendations waiting for you. And the next travel tip you need to know when visiting Spain for the first time has everything to do with Menú del Día. Menú del Día stands for menu of the day in English. Menú del Día is a fixed price lunch and it comes with 2 to 3 courses and a drink. It usually ranges anywhere from 12 euros all the way to 20 euros, but of course, it depends on the restaurant you're getting the Menú del Día, the price it will be. The way Menú del Día works, you usually get a starter, a main, a dessert, and a drink. And the last food and drink tip I have for you when visiting Spain for the first time is to be sure to try jamón ibérico. It's world class Iberian ham where these pigs eat acorns and the ham is to die for. It's super delicious, so be sure to check that out. And specifically, if you are interested in ham, also be sure to try paleta, which is one of my favorite cuts. And if you want to try the highest quality of jamón ibérico, specifically the ones where it's acorn fed pigs, you have to try the jamón ibérico de bellota. That basically means acorn fed. And trust me when I mean you have to try that, especially if you eat meat. It's just so good. So now that we've covered food and drink when you're visiting Spain for the first time, now we have to get all into transportation and getting around. So the apps you definitely should have downloaded in regards to car service when visiting Spain for the first time are apps like Cabify, Uber, Free Now Taxi, Bolt, and that's all the car service apps I know of in Spain at the moment. It's important to note that Uber does not work everywhere in Spain, but it does work in major Spanish cities such as Madrid and Barcelona. But in Madrid, Uber works significantly better because in Barcelona, Bolt works better than Uber. When I lived in Madrid, Spain for 5 years, I basically would compare and contrast the prices before I would order a cab, especially if I wasn't in a hurry, to see which app is going to give me the best price. Outside of car service apps, there are street cabs almost everywhere in Spain. And if there aren't street cabs for whatever reason, you can almost always Google taxi in wherever you are, part of Spain, and some type of number should come up. That's what I did when I moved to Tenerife specifically, and I was able to find a cab just fine. Outside of street cabs, there are taxi stops known as parada de taxis, and there you can wait for a cab. The only thing to consider with this is that parada de taxis aren't everywhere. They're only on significant streets and significant places. So you kind of have to look for them. Sometimes you can put them on a GPS and you can be able to find it with Google Maps, but sometimes you can't and you just have to walk wherever you are and see where the closest one is. So something to keep in mind if you are looking for a taxi stop in Spain. Alrighty. And the next travel tip, if you're visiting Spain for the first time, is I would download some other apps such as Google Maps. Google Maps is much better than Apple Maps. And lastly, I would also download Renfe if you are going to be doing train travel within Spain. And the next travel tip you need to know when visiting Spain for the first time has everything to do with renting a car. In my opinion, cars are not needed for exploring big Spanish cities, but they are great for exploring rural regions in Spain, such as Basque Country and the north of Spain, as well as islands. Here is a great pro travel tip, especially if you are American. You might need an IDP, which is an international driver's permit, if you are going to be renting a car in Spain. Technically, when Americans rent a car in Spain, they are supposed to be asking you for the IDP, but not every car rental agency will ask you. But in my opinion, it's best to know before you go, one, and it's also best to prepare in case they do ask you for it so you can actually get the rental car versus if you don't have it and they don't give you the rental car. So that is everything you need to know about renting a car in Spain. Next, piggybacking off of renting a car, if you don't like driving in foreign countries or you don't like driving when you're traveling, I would highly recommend to consider train travel, such as Renfe, which is the high speed train in Spain, or you can also go with Wigo, which is the low budget cost high speed train in Spain. Train travel is great between major cities and super popular Spanish regions, so it is a great option for traveling and getting around within Spain. My only extra travel tip I have about train travel is to definitely make sure you book early for those better prices. And the next travel tip you need to know when visiting Spain for the first time has everything to do with public transportation. In big Spanish cities, the public transportation runs extremely well, so no need to worry about public transportation within these cities. However, I would recommend if you are going to be getting public transportation in these cities to consider getting daily passes depending on however long you stay in Spain. So, for example, if you go to Madrid and you're going to be visiting for 3 days or 5 days or maybe even a week, I would highly recommend to get the unlimited public transportation pass for 7 days. This way, you can move within the city of Madrid without any restrictions or hesitations or having to pay extra. Adding on another great way to save for public transportation in Spain, if you are under the age of 26 years old specifically, is the Abono Joven or the Youth Pass. In many regions, such as Madrid, you can save a lot on public transportation getting the Youth Pass or the Abono Joven. So it's definitely something to look into, especially if you are going to stay in any Spanish region for a significant amount of time. So that is everything you need to know about transportation visiting Spain for the first time. The next travel tip I have for you has everything to do with accommodations. If you are traveling to Spain for the very first time or in general, I highly recommend going with a hotel versus a Airbnb or a touristic apartment. And the reason for that is because Airbnb in Spain has become insanely controversial. And the reason for this is because Airbnb pushes a lot of locals outside of the city center because a lot of those apartments in the city center are allocated for touristic apartments. So a lot of people in Spain are super over Airbnb and they're super over this. And of course, it adds on to the housing crisis. So if you can, I highly recommend staying at a hotel in Spain when you're visiting versus an Airbnb. Outside of that, there are fantastic hotels in Spain, especially to consider when you're visiting Spain for the first time. Specifically, my favorite are Paradores. Paradores are a Spanish hotel franchise and they are known for historic buildings being converted into luxury hotels. A lot of the Paradores hotels are super beautiful, and if they aren't a historic building that was converted into a luxury hotel, it's almost always in a really cool and special spot, such as next to a really cool village or possibly next to a really beautiful national park or something like that. So, to recap, you learned about visiting Spain for the first time, you learned about basic info, you learned about entry and visa, you learned about food and drink, you learned about transportation, and you also learned about accommodation. Now, if you're curious about the cost of living in Spain as an American, be sure to check out this video next.